I think the not being honest about expectations that may or may not be met, not being honest about what you really know to be true about the numbers. I mean, the thing is, it is a very small world. And once you start talking to other investors or customer base or whatever, you can find this stuff out. And so just be open about it and have confidence in your conviction about how you're going to address this. But I think the evasion of direct answers and questions is a big red flag.
We were saying something like, this is a little flippant, but like, you can lie about the future, but you're not allowed to lie about the past. Like, not that you're lying about the future, but like, but you can't change the past. Like, that has to be right up front and center.
No, I was going to say, I also say this to people, and that this is like, I'm thinking about this from investing and from granting, that like, if someone has chosen to invest in you or grant to you or sign a contract with you, you've already acquired that customer. You've already acquired that ambassador for you. Don't lose that person by hiding information. Like, tell us what a problem is that you're trying. Like, we might be able to really help you with that problem.
Welcome to Money Moves, the show about raising money, making great investments, and building venture scale businesses. I'm Neil Devani, your host and the founder of Necessary Ventures, a firm investing in what the world needs. Each week, we'll talk to folks who have raised anywhere from $10 million up to billions of dollars. We'll learn how they return multiples of 10x to 100x or more to their investors. We dive into their stories, uncovering what worked and what didn't, learning from real experiences to understand the journeys of raising capital and rapidly scaling a business. Money Moves isn't just for those already in the game. It's also for anyone interested in the mechanics of startups and venture capital. Whether you want to raise money, make better investments, or just understand how it all works, Money Moves gives you the insights and advice you need to succeed. So join us each week and hear from those who've been through it all and learn from their journeys. Fine. All right, Tara and Minnie, thank you so much for joining for an episode of Money Moves.
Good to be here, Neil.
So happy to be here.
The first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about investing, and then we'll get into some of your founder experiences, Minnie, and then we'll talk about some other stuff after that. First things first, let's talk about investing. What are some of the best investments either of you've ever made?
Tara, you want to go first? Jump in.
Sure. Okay, great. One of the best investments we've made, and we are invested in 5 of the funds, is with Collab Fund. And we have known the founder of Collab Fund for many years and worked with him in different capacities and helped them get started as well. And so have a really close working relationship and share a similar ethos and value and value sets, and sort of look at the world the same way that Craig and his team at Collab Fund do. So I'd say that's one of the best investments. They just recently had an exit, and it was like a 20x exit. We're still invested in 5 of their funds, but that was something that just happened recently that we're really proud of and has been like an adventure along the way.
Awesome. Can you talk a bit more about the values that you mentioned, like the value alignment that you're looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really similar in trying to think about making the world a better place and moving the world forward in a way that's not subscribing like adamantly to an ESG or an impact framework, but it's just about looking at how can you allow people to access capital, for instance, and say that is something that moves the world forward, or how can you identify and support different energy sources that's not in a way that is not tearing down fossil fuels and saying it's only clean tech, but what are different ways that we can kind of meet in the middle and think about how we can be sourcing ideas and founders who have a purpose and a profit motive and incentive. And I think about this in a lot of the work that we do, where we're trying to support something that makes the world better in terms of either environmental sustainability or educational or economic access, or empowering and informing people to make good decisions. But it's a way that has to pass what Collab uses and what Ben Goldhirsh, my boss, kind of came up with as the villain test, that it doesn't really matter for the inherent goodness unless there is a commercial or capital reason that this idea should be adopted and fully invested in. So a villain has to embrace, oh, this is good for the environment, but that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because this makes good business sense. So I think that that's like the value is that villain test.
Yeah, that's a great rule of thumb. And we're going to come back and ask you a ton of questions, but we'll turn the focus onto Minnie for now. Minnie, tell us about your best investment.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about Tara's answer, and I was like, oh, Tara just invested in TenOneTen, so pretty soon she's going to have to revise this answer, of course. It's like, oh, yeah.
Number one.
You better prove it. Pressure's on, Minnie.
I know. I'm feeling a lot of heat over there from my investors. I mean, I had lots of thoughts. I was thinking, oh, personally, best thing I did was invest my career at Google was my best move for sure. And that was entirely, I was going to work at a different search engine called Overture, which is here in Pasadena. I was pretty excited about search. And I interviewed with Eric, Larry, and Sergey. And I called my mom. I was like, these guys seem really smart. And I think that working at Google and just seeing the power of individuals to change the world, like that then informs all of my investments as I go forward. I've seen over and over, like single individuals, not just Eric, Larry, and Sergey, but like you look at Ev, at Blogger, and then at Twitter, like these people who move the needle forward in society. And that's what gets me really excited. It's always all about the people for me.
Neil, may I just add something as may I just add a corollary? Because I worked at InfoSeek, precursor to Google, and Snap.com, precursor to Google. And then I had an opportunity to work at Google. And my mom always says, you should have just worked at Google. And I was like, yeah, I should have just worked at Google. So I can say maybe that was a bad investment that I made in my time in working at these places that were not Google, but we're in the same business.
It's good to know everyone's having these conversations with their moms. That's one unifying theme here. So, Minnie, you were at Google, and then at some point along the way, you started a company. I'd love to hear more about that. What was the impetus to become a founder?
Yeah, I'd been at Google a third of my life when I left. So I'd been there almost 12 years at the time. So it wasn't that I needed to leave. I had been there almost my whole career. And I went on maternity leave. And that's the true answer. Like, I thought I'd stay home for 7 months. It was my first baby. And I was home pretty much alone with the baby for a couple months and thought, I am going to go crazy doing this. And I can't keep my hands out of trouble. So I had made a bunch of angel investments, and I invested very, very early in one of my friends from Google, George Arison, now the CEO of Grindr. And yeah, he was very strategic. And I was like, how's my angel investment doing? Let me start showing up at your house at 10 o'clock every day and make sure it's moving forward. We started buying and selling cars on Craigslist. And that was the glamorous beginning of Shift.
And you angel invested and then decided, okay, this is something I want to get involved with full time. Was there a specific moment, or what led you to go from being an angel investor to being part of the team?
Yeah, I started working there and I got fully enamored with entrepreneurship. I loved that Google was fast moving at the beginning, but obviously now it's a larger organization, and I couldn't just draw something on a piece of paper, send it to our developers in Thailand, and like launch a website the next day. There was people who owned the horizontal and owned the vertical and owned everything else at Google. And I got really enamored with the fact that I could just launch things and build things and see them out in the world. So it was more entrepreneurship and building and launching than it was used cars, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. Did you get involved with fundraising at Shift?
Yes, we all got involved with fundraising, although George, who was the CEO, carried the bulk of that, but I was his co-founder, COO. So I definitely went to all the pitches. And these are the old days where we marched up and down Sand Hill Road, very much physically going from the upstairs at Greylock to the downstairs at Kleiner Perkins or whatever. Can't even remember who's upstairs at who, but run into everyone in the cafe during the day.
Do you feel like you learned a lot through that experience? What are some things you can share?
Yeah, I learned a lot. In some ways, different axes, in some ways it was learning like everything that you might have learned in business school, like every different function I was exposed to. I was the COO. So, you can learn about all these things, but like at Google, you've got a much more narrow purview. And all of a sudden, I was managing a sales team. The sales and marketing rolled into me. I'd never managed a sales org before. And I was managing HR, and I was managing facilities, and I'd managed product before, a huge amount of operations, like all of those things, all of them I didn't know. So all of that I learned. And at the same time, probably much more sort of profound for me was learning about managing people at scale and quickly, and an organization that wasn't sort of set, but was doubling every 6 months or something. So much of that. And that was all the personal growth involved with managing people, was probably the hardest.
How did you manage that? What were some of the different strategies you used? Because I feel like a lot of founders go through that. They come from a sales and marketing background or BD background, or they come from like a product or engineering background, and they have to learn everything, and they have to learn it very quickly as they're trying to build a business and scale a business.
I mean, I think the best thing on the business side that I think we did well was we just hired really good people to take over those functions at the right time. And everything reaches sort of a breaking point where all of a sudden you need an executive might even be too strong of a word, but someone who has a lot more knowledge, and then to be able to hand that off, right? And so I think that side was really about hiring really good people. And I think we did that really well. I think on the managing people, I found that a lot harder. You can't just hand that off, right? That wasn't like I just hire someone better. I think in retrospect, I would have hired a really good senior head of HR earlier and really made that empowered them. But other than that, I think it was iterating and going through some hard times in terms of people not being happy, having to fire people, having to communicate with people, being told I wasn't a good communicator, even though all I do all day is talk. I think I'm a good communicator. And I think probably the thing there is just knowing that it's hard and being able to say, okay, that's hard feedback, and I'm still going to show up at work the next day and learn from it.
When you talk about like a senior HR leader being a good earlier hire that you would have made knowing what you know now, what do you think that person brings? What's the unique value of that person?
I mean, if I could point one lesson at Shift, I'm not sure I could, but one lesson on the HR side at least is sometimes you lose the forest for the trees, and you can go and optimize your business and figure out whether people should be W-2 or 1099 and how to pay the most efficiently for the right skill. But what's the forest here? The forest is like, I want to pay as much as I can to some degree. Why build a business if you're not employing people and treating them extremely well? Like, it's a core part of these people's lives. And I think HR can help keep you focused on the big picture of why you're doing this, which is to help improve people's lives. And like, the people you can improve the most are the people who are part of your organization. And then taking that down a level into, okay, what does that mean about how we communicate and how we hire and how we fire and everything else? But I think it's someone who's gone through all that and has the people's interest in mind.
Yeah. I've seen that at a range of companies where they prioritize that early and some don't, and it ends up being like a harder learning curve. And it all kind of seems to fall under like the umbrella of culture, and something that first time founders, I think, will like kind of hand wave as not being important, just kind of focus on product and sales. And then second time founders understand that that's where a lot of things come from is from culture.
Well, that's kind of what I said, the big picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think there's culture, there's other dimensions like hiring. I think that's the other big thing that I think people don't realize, that if you're going to scale, something like a quarter to a third of your time, my time, is on hiring. And that can't just be outsourced to an HR person, but that's part of the people ops function, is understanding that the whole part of being able to scale your organization is going to be hiring, and people don't spend enough time on it. And I think so there's there's culture, there's hiring, there's just almost like the operational side of things. And I think sometimes people think of HR as a little bit more of like a functional thing as opposed to a much more holistic key part of maybe probably your leadership executive team.
Yeah. Apart from the people ops and HR and that kind of stuff, are there things that you learned from your founder experience about fundraising that you didn't know at first that you know now and you share with founders?
I mean, everything. And actually, probably I've learned a lot more now being a VC than I did as a founder. Like, I'll give one example. So as a founder, VCs sort of annoyed me when they'd ask us for our financial projections into some future that I knew was kind of bullshit, right? Especially the earlier stage your company is, the more who knows what are we going to be doing in 2 years? Like, I have no idea. Like, I barely know what we're doing in 2 months. Like, I'm still just going through my first cycles of learning. Now, as a VC, I am totally the annoying VC who wants to go through the financial projections. And to me, it's a reflection of both. I mean, it's a reflection of so many things, but it's a reflection of how ambitious is a founder? How much do they have a handle on their business? How much do they realize that by the time they're at a Series B, so let's say that they're a seed founder, the Series B investor wants to invest in an instrumented business, meaning a business where you pour money in the top and you understand the knobs and levers and you can turn them and you can control the output at the end. And that is all baked into what your financial forecasts look like. And your sophistication of just knowing who is your ICP, what are their budgets, how do you reach them, all of that stuff can be in people's heads. But if they can't get into financial plan, sorry, this was just one example, but there's a lot there that I didn't understand when I was going through as a founder. And now, having seen 1,000 pitches, I've become the annoying VC that I sort of didn't understand before.
I think I'm that annoying person sometimes or all the time. So I get it.
It's not annoying though. It's critical. It's like you need to sell your vision and be able to like show the steps along with the vision, because you want to bring someone into the vision and have someone support you and then be your ambassador. Like, so it's critical.
But it's made up. I mean, but it's also a lot of times it's sort of what is my revenue and how many AEs are going to be, how is my funnel going to convert? Like, I really have no idea how that's going to look in 2 years, but it is important. So many of those things that I didn't quite understand why they were important, running a good process, having time pressure, but not too much time pressure testing it with, let's say, half a dozen VCs and getting feedback before you schedule 20 other conversations and sort of then learn that your pitch was wrong. Like, getting your data room really together, rehearsing it with other investors before you go and pitch people. Like, so much of the fundraising process, I just didn't know, because you only go through each round once.
Have your thoughts changed on things like warm intros versus cold emails, or things like how many times to follow up with someone?
Yeah, so only warm intros as a starting point. And yeah, I tend to think like following up multiple times just generally isn't a thing that really works. Like, basically, you can follow up once because sometimes people get really busy or traveling. But like, basically, if someone's interested, they're going to follow up, and you following up. I even would say like some of the model of like Techstars will put you, all the companies in Techstars will put you on their mailing list so that you're getting their periodic updates. But at some point, they're giving me an update every 2 or 3 weeks. And I then start filtering those because there's just way too much. And then if they actually want to reach me, I've just filtered them out because they're sending me way too much. So I actually think like it's about finding the right person who's excited and wants to be engaged, not pestering them.
Yeah.
Or not wasting your time. It's, and I don't really mean that as like it's a pestering. It's not a good use of your time. Like, it's better to spend your time figuring out how to get your pitch right so that it resonates with people, and finding the right people who it's going to resonate with, rather than sort of tracking, like, nudging.
Yeah, the fourth or fifth follow-up is probably less valuable versus recognizing that you have something you need to work on with your pitch.
The third follow-up, I mean, you can follow up once, but
let's talk. We've already kind of talked about it. Let's talk about your transition to venture capital. So after Shift, you became a full-time VC. I'm assuming the angel investing was interesting and exciting enough to pull you in that direction. But tell us more about that journey, that transition.
Yeah, no, angel investing was just almost felt different than VC. I was not sure I wanted to go into VC. I like accomplishing things. Like I like, even if it's like the freaking vacuuming, like it's just a sense that I'm making progress. And I like that about operations. And like some of the stuff with VC, you spend 2 weeks going deep and spending all your time doing diligence and talking to customers. And then you just throw away your work in VC sometimes. I mean, sometimes you invest, but like, some of that stuff did not sound appealing to me. I've never been on social media. I mean, like whatever, I like have an account. And like I thought the VCs all were on VC Twitter and we all had big blogs and presences. I'm not an investment banker. I really don't. I'm not good at the sort of growth stage stuff. I get all these things that I just had that I thought VCs should be good at, which sounds like a very female comment to be like, oh, I didn't think I'd be any good at this. But I moved to LA, and LA when I didn't have a job and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And the VC community here was so welcoming. And credit to Crosscut, they were like, come to our partner meeting sometime, see what it's all about. And I was like, great, I won't talk, I won't interrupt, but I'm really excited to go to your meeting. And then, of course, I sat in the meeting. Number one, Brian Garrett was like, the reason I'm inviting you is because I want you to talk. If I didn't want you to talk, then I wouldn't invite you. It's not really much value to us. And two, as soon as I got there, like I couldn't close my mouth because that's like I had a lot of opinions. I was like, oh, this actually has a lot of similarities. Like I spent my whole career doing hiring people. I mean, that was really a third of my job, both at Google and at Shift. So all of a sudden I was like, oh, interviewing founders who are building products feels very similar to interviewing product managers who are going to build products. Like there was a lot that I felt like, oh, I have some muscle memory. I'm not on VC Twitter, but like some of this stuff feels like stuff I'm interested in.
Yeah. And so from that experience, then you decided you wanted to do it full time?
Yeah, I started meeting more of the VC firms in town and I liked it more and more. And I realized like some angel investing is not the same in any way. Like I'm a talker, I'm a social person. I don't know what I'm thinking if my mouth isn't open. And so actually having a few people on a team where we could really learn from each other and grow smart together, that was fabulous. Like looking at deals together with other very smart people and also being able to build something. Like I actually feel like David Waxman, my partner, like jokes about all my initiatives, but I've got initiatives all the time and we're building something. We're building a platform. It turns out it's like my dream job, but I just didn't really know that. And also I think I didn't really know it. I also, like I said before, like I think I was tempted by VC, but like almost embarrassed or nervous to admit it. Like it felt very presumptuous to show up in LA. I knew not no one, but like no one in tech in LA. And to show up at all the VC firms and be like, hey, I want to be a partner here. Because I was like a little too old to just be like an associate. So I was like, it felt weird to be like, nice to meet you, Mark Suster. We'd just been introduced. Like, I'd like to be a partner at Upfront. Didn't feel like a natural conversation. And it was really sort of people showing me that was possible. And I think sometimes that's like the role of really good mentorship is to help draw out what you really are sort of feeling, thinking, wanting, but you're not quite ready to say you want. So yeah, once I got going, now there's no stopping, Neil.
I'd love to hear that because I do think a lot of people feel that way and need that kind of mentorship. And I also would have never expected you to say that. Like, I feel like you have a very strong drive, kind of like as you mentioned with your initiatives. So I appreciate that vulnerability. And also like all of us have things that we want, but we're not sure if we should go for it or if it's for us, if it's the right fit or whatever. And navigating that can be very tricky.
Yeah. Just being able to, I mean, it's a big lesson learned is being able to say what you want, being able to say what you like need help with, like being able to communicate it. It's often like, I don't know. I was saying at Shift, like we did 2 riffs. So 2 big layoffs and they were the world's most stressful things in my head, thinking about them. And then once I started talking to like our board, like then we came up and like our HR people, like, then we came up with a plan and we could execute and we were not the first company to ever go through a riff and there's the playbook and all of those things. But like, sometimes it's in me, but I have to spit it out and admit to it and then and then it doesn't hold the same sort of like power. Anyways, I guess going into VC, there was a lot going into VC there too.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you seen any differences in how you think about fundraising now that you're full-time in VC, whether that's from being a VC interacting with founders or as a VC fundraising from LPs? Like how has your thinking about fundraising evolved?
I think that what happens sometimes is when it's not an easy fundraise, which I don't think most people have easy fundraises, whether they're funds or entrepreneurs. Like people often talk about like how to pick your VC. I just don't think like a lot of people, it's not my audience that I'm talking to. It's the people who are like, they have so many VCs, they're busy picking their VCs. I think that what happens though, when it's a harder raise is each time you sort of think, what do I need to build? What are my milestones in order to raise my next round of capital? And I think that can get dangerous. Like you need to do some of it, but the mantra I like is VCs are not your customer, right? If you build a great business, there will be dollars that want to follow. People ask about exit opportunities. Like there will be exit opportunities. There will be, and not trying to always think, oh, this VC said I need a mobile app, so I need to build a mobile app. You know your business. Same thing goes with your board, probably even more so with your board, is your board thinks you need to do XYZ or do less, more of XYZ, less of it. They don't know your business. And so it's just easier to do that when I'm in the VC seat and I'm the one giving away money rather than sort of the one who needs to think about payroll. But my lesson of being a founder there is like, you just need to think for yourself and you need to be able, and it's not a thing that you get when you're in the Google org or sometimes in other things, because you just have to be carving out that time to really deeply think about like, what are my North Stars and why am I building this? And what do I need to be building? Not what is my next round of capital?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that's true for VCs with LPs? I feel like there's a much higher degree of conservatism and risk avoidance between GPs and LPs than GPs and founders. Maybe that's particular to venture versus other asset classes. But like when you're talking to a founder as a VC, you're seeking out risk and you're building a portfolio. Whereas I think LPs are a bit more risk averse in terms of they want to see similar model, similar portfolio construction, similar ownership thresholds and these kinds of things versus someone who's like, hey, I have a brand new approach here. There's got to be a lot more evidence and traction for most LPs. And Tara, please jump in if you agree or disagree.
I'll start. I mean, one thing I think is that LPs are very varied, right? And so there's an institutional LP who's looking for your track record and has a risk avoidance and a flight to quality and wants the person who's spinning out a Kleiner. And then there's family offices who some people want, or it's not just family offices, but like some LPs want to be in the hot thing. Some VCs want to be in the hot thing. And like, oh, we want to get access where it's hard to get access. Some people want like heads down company builders with consistency, right? So I think there's I think there's more variability in LP than there is in VC, but I think it exists in both.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I think it really depends on the LP and it depends on the background of the LP and it depends on the role that the LP wants to play. I mean, I know for us, Ben and I helped build Good together, and now that's merged with Upworthy's largest social impact communications firm. But what excites us is being part, like sinking our teeth in really early on to an idea or with a founder or with a manager where we feel like we can play an active role and provide something valuable in addition to our financial capital. Like we really always think about the work that we do in general with our financial, human, and social capital. And so we want to be involved and be active investors and active partners and supporters. So that's, I could see if we were a little farther along organizationally, but for us, we want to be active and we want to be like participate. We want to be thought of as extended team members and partners with that. And also knowing, because we've been in the position of building something or asking for money or being respectful too, and having open lines of communication of like, would this be helpful to you to have this introduction? If not, no worries, but that's where we want to provide value and then derive value as well.
Yeah. I think that's something that every GP would love to have an LP, right? Someone who wants to be more than just capital and be a real partner.
I think it depends on person.
Fair,
Right?
yeah. There's a wide range of GPs, just like there's a wide range of LPs, and there's some who probably don't want anything more than a check.
Yes.
When you all are thinking about the folks who are pitching you, what do you see as like the thing that makes you sit up and take notice? What are the things you're looking for to separate something that's interesting or someone that's interesting from the rest?
I'll start. I also do this podcast. I was just chatting with Nancy Liu, and one thing she said, she just summarized it so well. She said excellence. I mean, it's all for me, people. Like, I'm number one looking for people. And excellence was a really good one. It's not the only thing I look for, but basically she's like, if there's someone who's achieved top level excellence, Olympic swimmer, concert pianist, they understand grit, hard work. They've pushed themselves. Like, you can't get to a level of excellence without learning a lot of those skills. And she thinks that that's then applicable to another field. And she's like, we do learn from our failures. And it's great when people can talk about how they've learned from their failures. But I also want someone who has learned what excellence feels and looks like. Another one I like a lot is distance traveled. And distance traveled for me is, it's great that you went to Harvard and I went to Harvard and we all went to Harvard, but your dad went to Harvard and my dad went to Harvard, whatever. But the people who are like, yeah, no one in my family went to college and I worked 3 jobs and I was a waitress, and like, wow, you're like, you came to this country with $75, whatever it is, like whatever the story is. But the distance travel is often impressive because it's kind of like we're looking for inflection points in the companies. Like, you want to see that this slope is really steep and that it's going to continue. And so sometimes seeing the slope from 0 to here helps you understand where it's going in the future. So, yeah, I mean, as I said at the very beginning, like, I just think individuals move our world forward. And so I'm looking to find those people and sit as close as I can to them.
And I would say, like, the excellence is really good framing, because I was going to say passion, but it's actually like realized or accomplished or achieved passion, because it can't just be the passion that ignites you and that attracts you and pulls you in. It's then like, what do you do, and or what have you done with that passion? So I think that kind of on the excellence and even the distance traveled, I mean, so much of what we're doing is we are looking at having a mission, like mission aligned investing alongside our grants. And so we're really thinking about, is this person, either this founder or this manager, someone who is represents a voice or a force who's not typically been at the table? And if they've been able to demonstrate, maybe in a different industry or field or endeavor, how they can have a seat at the table, and so why we should invest with them? Or is the product or service or platform that the founder is offering, does that serve a role or a purpose where there wasn't something prior? But I do think that I want to work with people I want to spend time with, and I want to be pushed by those people. I want to respect those people. I want to trust those people, and I want to be absolutely captivated, inspired by those people, by what they say and then what they deliver on, and how they do it.
The no asshole rule is one that I think a lot of people bring up and not everyone adheres to, but seems to be very highly correlated with a good quality of life. Minnie, this may be a time for me to tell you that I was a champion pianist when I was younger, but that was, I don't know if like age 10 or 11 counts, if that's the peak of the mountaintop.
I love that. That's definitely the right time to be telling me these things, Neil. I like that excellence is like realized passion.
Yeah.
Tara said something like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to think about it, because it is hard to be excellent if you don't actually care about the thing that you're going after, right? It's usually coincidental, those two things.
Yeah, and it's apparent if you don't care. And why would we get behind something you don't care? I mean, again, depends on the investor, depends on the LP. But for me, I want to be with someone who cares about something and who can then achieve it. We're not in to just be passively writing checks and then growing our endowment. We would like to do that, but we would like to do that and with.
I like that. I agree 100%. What do you think that other investors, whether GPs or LPs, are looking for or indexing on that you think is unimportant, that you think doesn't really matter?
Sometimes people get too hung up on all of the things that are not just the founders. And I admire it when people are great with their theses of where the industry is going. But the TAM, Tom, Sam slide, oh my God, everyone coming out of business school tells you they're TAM and they're Tom and they're Sam. I always fast forward through that slide.
And you
it's
mentioned
not that they don't have to be big, huge outcomes in big businesses and you have to have big aspirations, but everything's going to change. And they're always just silly numbers of $100 billion, whatever.
Well, I mean, Minnie, you said that about like how frustrated you were as a founder with having to come up with projections, like financial projections that were just assumptions based on assumptions, based on assumptions, based on someone's worldview. And that's so much of anything anyway, but you still need it. But when people like adhere too closely to that and to those like specifics and those numbers and like this outcome, contexts change all the time. Situations change all the time. So I would say I'll agree with that as well.
So I've got like 100K ARR right now, but look, there's 100 billion over here that is my addressable market. Like there's a lot of distance between here and there.
Yeah.
And I think being able to be like, to recognize that, to be like, oh, I'm going to own this. This is like a world that we're creating together and that we're like projecting and I'm selling you on, but the world can change. And I think when people can't have a little humility about like being able to change the way change the way their original thesis or the way they were originally thinking about something, or they're adhering too strongly to their personally held belief about this market or about this product or about, I think that becomes a little dangerous also.
Yeah, over obsessed with the solution versus solving the problem, right?
Right.
I tell this to folks on our team where it's like, if you're learning something from the TAM slide, the problem slide, this is probably not a company you're qualified to be investing in. Like you should already have a good understanding of those things and come into the conversation with knowledge and like just skip through that slide and get to the solution, understand what is this person suggesting, what's novel about it, instead of getting excited about how big a market is or, oh, this new problem that no one's ever heard of before. It's a generality, but usually true. What are some things that are like hard nose for both of you, or like immediate red flags where you're like, okay, this is not someone we want to spend time with or invest in, other than, of course, being an asshole?
Tara?
Well, all I could think of was a pitch with my investment committee where the person was an asshole and where they weren't answering questions directly. I mean, I've actually had a couple of instances where it's been like, don't give us the narrative arc and the Toastmasters political answer us directly. What does this cost? What are you seeing? And that when people are also using language to obfuscate, that drives me nuts, because in the end, it's smart people assembled in a room. I want us all to be able to show that we can speak a similar language and we could explain this to a fifth grader or something, an advanced fifth grader, but that's important. But I think that's part of being an asshole is when you refuse to explain in simple language. But I think the not being honest about expectations that may or may not be met, not being honest about what you really know to be true about the numbers. I mean, the thing is, it is a very small world. And once you start talking to other investors or customer base or whatever, you can find this stuff out. And so just be open about it and have confidence in your conviction about how you're going to address this. But I think the evasion of direct answers and questions is a big red flag.
We were saying something like, this is a little flippant, but like you can lie about the future, but you're not allowed to lie about the past. Like, not that you're lying about the future, but like, but you can't change the past. Like that has to be right up front and center.
No, I was going to say, I also say this to people, and that this is like, I'm thinking about this from investing and from granting, that like, if someone has chosen to invest in you or grant to you or sign a contract with you, you've already acquired that customer. You've already acquired that ambassador for you. Don't lose that person by hiding information. Like, tell us what a problem is that you're trying. We might be able to really help you with that problem. If not, we're going to appreciate the honesty. But again, I also recognize that this is this is our method of communication where I prefer knowing the good, the bad, and the ugly right up front and as it's happening, because maybe I can help address that, rather than like, I had an instance where I read about something in a newspaper and I was like, why didn't you tell me? Like, now you've like completely obliterated any trust, and we're going to pull our money out from you. So why would you have done that? Like, you just hit yourself. And I will tell others like about this situation. So I just feel like being open is always a good policy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, we were just talking about PR training. This is the opposite, actually. PR training, it's like whatever question they ask, just give them your talking points. Like, this is meant to be something different. Yeah, no, I mean, the biggest reason we pass, and this is kind of goes back to your like chasing people, is because it's not the right fit for us. Yeah. And like, and I know, but like we tend to lead rounds when someone is raising $2 to $4 million. We're B2B investors. Like, all your cannabis pitches, I don't need to see them. It's not us. I think people waste way too much time trying to pitch the wrong person the wrong thing.
Can I just add something to that, because it's sort of advice, and I just feel like, and Minnie, you've had this experience as well. Like, you've had to ask for money, and now you invest money, and you probably bring a candor and a directness and a respect that's bi-directional, saying, I'm going to save your time, you save my time. Let's show this mutual respect, because we're not investing in you. We may be able to help you with X, Y, or Z, but we're not going to. So take us off your hot list. Don't keep following up. I mean, it comes back to the following up. Like, just to be very clear and candid about like how you want to be communicated with, and then what the intended outcomes are. I mean, I get people send me things all the time, and I say, this does not look like something we would invest in. Do you want me to do this for you as a favor? Like, I'm very open. Like, okay, you tell me, favor for a 20-minute phone call or not? Great. And I've got a little something in the background here, but favor for a 20-minute phone call or not? This is not going to be a good use of the founder's time. It's not going to be a good use of my time. And I want someone to show me that respect, and I want to show someone else that respect.
I think that's super important. It also falls in the bucket, I think, sometimes of like people not doing their research, right? And Minnie, you were getting at this, and Tara, you're trying to get at it too, right? It's like people don't do the research in advance to understand who they're talking to and whether that's worth their time or not. And there's one thing where you're having a conversation just to have the conversation and see if you might know someone for each other, to make connections, that kind of more informal thing. But when you're going into pitches and you have no idea who you're talking to, it's also a waste of time when you're on the investment side, right? If you're like meeting with a founder and you didn't look at the deck, or a GP and you have no idea what it is, it's like, well, you're kind of wasting your time too. But I guess, I don't know, I'm always surprised at how often that's the case. What do you guys do when someone is not answering questions? If you're asking questions and they're just kind of dancing around it, or giving like the talking points or political answers, how do you handle that?
We just don't have a second meeting?
I've told them they're not answering the questions, and then that's done. So I think after a certain point, it's like, we're all adults here. Like, why aren't you answering the question?
Yeah.
I don't, maybe that's lacking a bit of diplomacy, but again, I just feel like don't waste your time and waste our time. So, and they not only won't get a second meeting, they may get money pulled from them.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm always like concerned about that myself, because I'll sometimes get wrapped up in something and I always try to like double check. Did I answer your question? So that's a question I love to ask back. And then I don't want to, no, not enough people are going to listen to this, hopefully, but maybe founders will. If I ask the question a second time with the exact same wording as the first time I asked it, that's sort of the signal of like, you definitely didn't answer my question. I'm going to ask it again and see if you noticed that I'm using the same words. And it's like a subtle indication to see if they're in the meta conversation, just in the conversation, and they're lost in the sauce. And sometimes people respond really well to that. You can just see like their demeanor changes. Oh shit, I didn't answer the question. And sometimes they have no idea, or they don't care, and they just kind of, keep on their path. But it's sort of like, I don't know, a little tactic I picked up years ago. Let's talk about conventional wisdom. What are some things that you think are conventional wisdom and are especially true, maybe even more true than the wisdom implies?
Tara, I was going to say VCs are not your customer. I already talked about it. And that was my thought.
I was going to be like more philosophical and invoke my like English literature major. I mean, I really try to adhere to the 4 agreements, the Toltec wisdom of the 4 agreements.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with those. Like,
yeah.
Always do your best, always be impeccable with your word, never make assumptions, and never take anything personally. And that I also feel like so much of anything that applies in your personal life can apply in your professional life and vice versa. And I just believe in that as conventional wisdom. Like those are 4 really stellar values to strive towards. And we all make mistakes, and we all will fall short on every single one of those. Some of us on more of those than not, and more frequently, but so it's like, it's a corollary. It's like an anti-answer to your question. So there I may be dodging the question, but that's the conventional wisdom by which I really try to live.
Yeah, I didn't know those 4. My similar one is show up, tell the truth, hope for the best. Like, you don't need to enjoy all of life. Sometimes it sucks and you don't want to go to work, but you have to show up and you have to tell the truth and you have to hope for the best. Similar.
Yeah.
I think both of those are great for when you're in a moment of adversity, right? You're taking something personal or you're thinking it's bigger than it is. I think those are really good pieces of advice.
Or assumptions. I mean, those are like the 2 things for me are the assumptions and taking things personally. Like, you cannot make assumptions. Like, when you're in the room with someone and they're dodging a question, you can't assume that they're dodging the question because they don't know, because anything could be going on. We're all human, and you don't know what's going on. So that's why it's like good to drill down and don't make assumptions about, you may have like confounded someone. You may have hit on something sensitive to them, but it is good wisdom.
Yeah. I've been thinking about the assumptions one kind of sounds like judgment versus discernment, right? Which is you don't know why they're not answering the question. It could be a good person or a bad person. You don't need to actually know to decide, yeah, this isn't for me, and I'm just going to not engage any further. And it can be completely neutral of any judgment to make that decision, which is often more valuable and keeps you in a place where you're learning more, right? You're keeping an open mind about what's possible. Go ahead,
I
Minnie.
think the other thing I always like is sort of one, my mother says repetition doesn't ruin the prayer. So like there is all those fundamental things, reminding yourselves of them doesn't ruin the fact that they're still good to keep in mind. And I think the urgent, important rocks, pebbles, stone type stuff, that is always a hard one for me, is not doing the things that are easy to do, but don't really move the needle forward, and needing to identify your stones and get them in the bowl first. And for me, it has like a lot of then implications. If there's something I really need to do, like my big, whatever stone that I need to get in the bowl, like I have to drop the ball on a lot of other things. And getting comfortable with that has been like just being like, oh, I'm inbox 10,000 tonight, and that's going to be okay. And I'm still going to go to sleep and get my exercise tomorrow and not reply to all my emails. So I'm working on the one thing that I really is the most important thing.
I'm actually going to just add, like, there's a poem. I use a lot of poetry and philosophy and quotations in my life and thinking about everything, work, personal. And there's a great writer and poet named David White. And he writes about kind of the integration of life and work. He does a lot of consulting with large corporations, Fortune 500. But he has a poem where he has the lines, start close in, don't take the second step or the third step, take the first step, the step you don't want to take. Because often it's easier to take that, like, to think about, the bigger picture or something that's ethereal or something that, but start with the hard work and like putting that focus on the big rock. Sometimes it's easier to fill in the pebbles, but it's taking that step you don't really want to take. That's harder to take. You need to take it.
That's where a lot of the learning is too often, right? If you should even take the second step or not.
Yeah. Yes. Great point.
There's some quote like that, but I don't quote things often. So Tara, you have to fill it in. But it's like, eat the frog first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
When you're like, if you have to eat a frog that day, like do it first so you don't have to do it later in the day. Similar?
Yeah, I think it's similar.
Thanks. Phew.
From Tara's expert knowledge, it is eating the frog. Yes.
Great.
And if you need to eat the frog, then yes, by all means. It's like the Navy SEAL who does the make your bed in the morning.
Yeah.
That incredible speech that he gives.
Let's flip the question. What do you think is conventional wisdom out there that's that's just wrong, that you've experienced in your life to be untrue?
You don't need to have all the answers, like have all of the answers. You don't need to have all of the answers. I think it's more important you need to be prepared, but you don't need to have all the answers. You need to show that you are capable of finding the right answers or finding an adequate answer, but you don't need to have all the answers, but show that you care enough that you've done some work. But I do think Minnie said that about women, and I think women need to feel like we need to have all of the answers, and it holds us back because guess what? You don't need all of the answers. You just need to show that the process by which you can derive answers.
Here's one that women get told. Women get told not to speak with verbal uptick. So the verbal uptick is ending the sentence with the question. So not to speak with verbal uptick, right? And so women are told speak definitively, like end your sentence with a period, not a question mark. I think that's wrong. I think everyone should end their sentences with a question mark. And then I think it just leaves open the room for everyone to disagree or to share their opinion. Because if you're stating something with a question mark, then everyone can kind of feel like there's room to agree or disagree. And so I think all men, maybe we should all talk like women.
I think that's your audience.
Can try that for the rest of the podcast.
Exactly. Should we? I mean, I brought a GP in to meet with my all male former wealth advisory group. And they very smart, very like hard science, life sciences, deep tech. And they told me she talks like a Valley girl. And I said, oh, hey, do you guys say that about tech bros? And they were like, and I was like, I'm your client. I'm like, and they said, no, you're right. And I was like, okay, and we're going to invest $1 million in the first time fund manager. Like, you take that. But so I think it can cut both ways.
I agree with it as advice. I'm just, maybe it's for all the male VCs out there. They should all talk with verbal uptick more often.
I will say I do find some male VCs to just be way more confident in their lack of knowledge or like loosely formed opinion. It's right. It's that what is it? Strong opinions weakly held. It's like, here's a thought. Don't have a strong opinion because you don't know anything about the topic, and you're going to influence people who maybe don't have as strong of an opinion, even though they know more than you, and you're just kind of poisoning the well for everyone. And I'm just, now that I've been doing it for 10 years and have certain things I know a lot about, I'll get really frustrated when I'm talking to like a younger investor, almost always a guy who just has that bravado. And I have to be like, I'm pretty sure that's not correct. And I'll even like hedge it myself where I'm not like, you're wrong. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's not right. When I know it's 100% wrong. And I feel like you see that, and it is, I mean, I think it is gendered. So that's a good one. We'll all add some upspeak. Let's move on to our lightning round. This has moved so quickly. We're gonna have to do another episode and have drinks at the next one. So, okay. First question is usually about voting, or I work a voting question in. That's no longer an important one since we're past election day. So let's start with, what food would you eat if you could only have one food for the rest of your life?
I'd probably just eat pizza, but that's what I would eat all the time if my mother and my husband didn't support me.
Chocolate.
Okay.
Chocolate?
Yeah. These are very different answers. Minnie more of a savory, cheesy kind of vibe, and Tara going with the classic sweet. Are we talking
Sweet
dark
fat.
chocolate or milk chocolate?
Milk chocolate, like sweet fat, milk chocolate with nuts. Sweet
Perfect.
fat, sink your teeth into something like that. Yeah. Mm.
Okay, harder question. What is the most difficult lesson you've had to learn in your career?
I think for me, like I used to be more like I can do things myself. Like I was very self-confident, and I've hit some real lows in like, not in like just career, but in life, where other people have been the ones who've brought me back to sanity and sort of picked me up. And that dependence on people, I think, has softened me to like the things that I like. I don't understand people with panic attacks. I want to judge them. I'm like, why do you have panic attacks? But like, there are things that I didn't understand and that other people didn't understand about me, but like were willing to support me and bring me back. And so I think it has softened me towards the things that I don't understand about others, the way they act, the way they do. I don't know why I picked on panic attacks, but whatever it is, sorry, that I think has softened me. And so the hardest things I've gone through have also made me a better person.
I was going to say, just to real quick to Minnie, it sounds like being more open to things you don't understand, maybe does that sound right?
Yeah, because I just realized people, we depend on each other. Like we are a communal society, and like it's very hard for someone to get through stuff always on their own.
Yeah. Tara, what do you think?
And I would say I'm a really hard worker, and I was sharing this with Minnie recently. I wish that I had actually worked harder earlier on in my career, and that I had taken stuff more seriously earlier on in my career, because I think, and I actually see this in a different way, magnified with some of the younger generations, where it's, I wish I had applied myself more in some of the littler things and the littler tasks and taken those seriously. And now I'm frustrated by the younger generations where I'm like, this is important. The little things matter. And I'm giving you opportunities that I didn't have, but I do wish I had like buckled down a little bit more earlier on.
Do you think that's universal, where like parents and older generations always want the younger generation and their kids to have more and try harder, and there's that like evolutionary kind of thing?
Maybe. I find it's the opposite of the way I was raised and the opposite of the way I perceive myself in the world. I think I lacked a maturity coming into the work world, like my first couple of jobs out of college. So I don't know. And I certainly, I could say some things about generational coddling and other expectations that are present in some of the younger set now that is different. And that was partly by societal, like the way parents were raising kids, but I'm not sure what it was for me. I think I expected like Minnie talked about having a baby at home, and one of my like inflection points with my job after I left Good, I had my first baby, and I didn't have a plan after. And then Ben called me and said, I need you to give away $1 million in the next 6 weeks for me. But I sort of had this idea of like, oh, I'm going to have a baby and the world is just going to magically, something's going to appear. And I'd never acted that way before, but for some reason I had this magical thinking of, I'm never going to work again or something. I don't know. I was married to a teacher. I don't know what happened.
I have this feeling like my parents had very high expectations for me, and I don't have my own kids yet, but at some point, I don't know if I'm going to be all the way on one end where I'm like, whatever you want to do, as long as you're happy, or if I'm going to be like, you must be the president of the United States. There is nothing below that. That's success. Hopefully somewhere in between there. We'll see. What's been the best moment of your business lives?
It's always the start of the things when you're in the honeymoon, like the start of Shift when we were just like growing like crazy, the start of Google when we were like sleeping in our offices, the start of TenOneTen when you're still in your honeymoon phase, like the learning when you're like just learning so much.
Tara, we'll give you a pause to think about it. We'll hit Minnie with the last question so she can go. Minnie, last question. Who's helped you most in your career?
My business partner, David Waxman. It's an easy one. Like we talk 5 times a day. He's been a founder many times. He's incredibly wise and patient. I'm incredibly impatient. We're a good pair.
Awesome. Well, thanks for going. We'll let you go to Cotillion, and appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, guys. I'm sorry I have to run. This is too fun.
All right, Tara, just you and me.
I would say for me, I agree with Minnie that there's something so exciting about being at the very beginning of something. However, the image that I have is we were doing a celebration at Grand Park for our LA 2050 initiative with the Goldhirsh Foundation. It was 2014. 1,500 people were there. It was all people who were like doing amazing things in Los Angeles for Los Angeles. We had a KCRW DJ. We had fruit carts. It was just like a huge, amazing event. And I was up on stage holding my baby and having my other little boy, like right there beside me, making a speech about the future of Los Angeles and what we built and the movement that we built. And that was a really wonderful, proud moment encapsulated in this like magical night that I can play over in my mind and feel really good about, and feel that moment of like, okay, I've achieved something.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was with your family as well.
It was with my family. And I was like, not only, and I was single at that stage. Like I had a baby and I had a little boy, and I was like, I was doing it all. I was totally working way harder than I'd ever worked. And I had built this little family and built this initiative at work.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks for sharing that. Our last question for you: who's helped you the most in your career so far?
Yeah. And I would have to say I've worked with Ben Goldhirsh now for 19 years. First, when I was the COO at Good with him, and now with him at the foundation and doing our grants and our investments. And I'm going to kind of like bring also Claire Hoffman, his wife, in here, because just in the same way that Minnie was talking about how she and David make such a good team, the three of us together make such a good team, but Ben and I were the impetus. But what I have found is there's so much trust, and they give me so much agency and ability to create and to test. And Ben keeps saying, I want you to fail more. I want you to take more risks. And what I will find is sometimes Claire and I will agree on something that Ben disagrees with, or Ben and Claire will agree on something that I disagree with, or Ben, it's this interesting little like mix where we can discuss and debate, and then have to compromise and concede, and then test things and come back and say, did that work? Did that not work? What worked? What didn't? Like, who was wrong here? How could we collectively do better? But it's really special to have that longevity of a friendship and a partnership, and one that's been very much values-based and very creative for years.
Yeah. I'm glad you said values-based, because it does sound like that's also a really big part of it, is like sharing values and a mission or a vision for where you want to impact the world and how you want to see it changed over time.
Absolutely. And I will say, like, we're a tax exempt organization, and I always say that like philanthropic capital should be risk capital, because we're not going to be voted out of office. We don't have shareholders we need to appease. We don't have to make quarterly goals like sales goals or revenue. But so I feel like we are dollars for public good. But I also really believe that just because that's our organizational structure doesn't mean you can't have a values-based and values-aligned approach to business or governance, or the way you interact with your employees or your board. Or I think it's just, so that's the way it manifests for me, but it doesn't mean someone else needs to be quote unquote saving the world in order to have these values. Yeah.
That's a good nuance. Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have. So I thank you so much for joining and for sharing so openly.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Thanks again for tuning in to this episode of Money Moves. If you learned something new or just loved this episode, click below to subscribe. See you next week.